Hi, everybody. Meteorologist Joe Cioffi here. It's the 7 o'clock hour, so it's now time for Hurricane Maria. If you missed the update I did on Hurricane Jose, you can, of course, replay it for up to 4 hours, or just go to the video library, and it's going to be the last video that's posted. I've been updating them separately rather than do them all on one shot. So good evening to those of you who are here from both of them. And Randy Broder, Delvin, Father Simeon is here, Gypsy. We've got Earl Warren standing at the gate there, Luigi Corso, good evening to you. So I'm going to get this underway. We're going to start looking at Hurricane Maria, which the Air Force reconnaissance aircraft went into this late this afternoon and found that the pressure had dropped down to the low 980s. And on the two passes that I saw, the pressures actually dropped 2 millibars in 1 hour. So it might be getting ready to do some rapid deepening. We'll see. But in terms of the structure, it looks very sound. There's a pretty solid core. The storm is fairly compact. Everything here says rapid intensification could occur. And you can see that some of the outer bands are getting very close now to the southern Leewards, northern Leeward Islands, and it's Maria's continuing to move on a course slightly north of due west. I expect this to hit the Leewards when it crosses. It might be a Cat 2. We'll just have to see what kind of intensification we get between now and Monday afternoon. But everything in the upper atmosphere says that this should strengthen. The wind, there's hardly any wind shear at all. The tropical atmosphere that Maria is embedded in is very moist. There is very little dry air around. You've got excellent outflow, excellent inflow. Everything seems to be working. Banding is developing, and you can see it here. And it's starting to take that sort of symmetric look that hurricanes, strengthening hurricanes like to do. So I think everything here looks to be on course. So why don't we take a look at the watches and warnings map. Now I know because I was told earlier today by someone in St. Thomas that the communication is extremely limited, if any exists at all, and a lot of the islands are in chaos. Barbuda has not a single human being on it for the first time in 300 years. So this might be the only kind of communication someone gets. So I'm putting up the map here, which shows the National Hurricane Center forecast track, and it's basically right over the northern Leewards, and a lot of the same islands that got hit by Irma will have a direct or a close pass with Maria. And we also then have a threat later on for the Virgin Islands. The forecast takes it right over Puerto Rico and then straddles it along the north shore of the Dominican Republic late this week. So you can see the timeline here is through the Leewards, Monday into Tuesday, early Tuesday morning, approaching the Virgin Islands later Tuesday afternoon, approaching Puerto Rico later Tuesday night into Wednesday, and then approaching the Dominican Republic Wednesday night into Thursday, and then possibly into the southeastern Bahamas by later Thursday night and on Friday. The Hurricane Center kind of maintains it on a fairly steady west-northwest track, closer to the west than true northwest, so maybe at about 285, 290 degrees at most. So this is the course for the next 5 days. You see the cone of uncertainty. So what I'm going to do is, for everybody's benefit there in the islands, if they hear this, this may be the only way you get to hear any updated hurricane watches and warnings. So here are some of the new advisory changes that have occurred. The government of Antigua and Barbuda issuing a hurricane warning for St. Kitts, Nevis, and Montserrat. The government of Antigua and Barbuda issuing tropical storm warnings for Antigua and Barbuda. This time it looks like those two islands may be on the northernmost fringe, but we'll see. Hurricane watch has been discontinued for those islands. So perhaps the more westerly track that this has been on is going to shift the hurricane conditions just a little bit further to the south. So that might be at least a little bit of a relief for those islands on the northeastern corner of the Leewards that were hit with direct hits by Irma. But be cautious here. The government of the Netherlands issuing a tropical storm warning now for Saba and St. Eustatius. Hurricane watch is now posted for the U.S. Virgin Islands, and the governments of Antigua and Barbuda have issued a hurricane watch for the British Virgin Islands. So those are all the changes. Now here's the summary of all the watches and warnings. So we have hurricane warnings are up right now for Guadeloupe, Dominica, St. Kitts, Nevis, and Montserrat. Tropical storm warnings for Martinique, Antigua, Barbuda, Saba, St. Eustatius, and St. Lucia. Hurricane watch in effect for the U.S. Virgin Islands, the British Virgin Islands, Saba and St. Eustatius, St. Martin, the Dutch side, St. Martin, the French side, and St. Bartholomew and Anguilla. And a tropical storm watch is in effect for Barbados and for St. Vincent and the Grenadines. So that is the summary of all of that. And if you can find that at nhc.noaa.gov. So that's nhc.noaa.gov for the summary of the tropical storm watches and warnings. And hopefully someone that was without communication hears that and is able to take whatever appropriate action they need to take with regards to protecting themselves and securing themselves and their family. Now, let's take a look at the latest hurricane tracking models, which haven't really changed very much. You can see that the track is pretty much over a large majority of these islands. Some track, the envelope is a little bit further to the north, some a little bit further to the south. But basically, there is some impact to virtually all of the Leeward Islands and then over the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico. And it may be at that point that we will see Maria at major hurricane status. We'll see if on the next reconnaissance aircraft check, if the pressure has dropped at the rate of 1 to 2 millibars an hour in between those two recon flights, then we have a pretty good indication that this is going to be on its way to becoming a major hurricane and doing it in a big hurry. After Puerto Rico, we go to the Dominican Republic. Now, the track models have them passing, the southernmost track models straddle the northeast coast of the Dominican Republic and then move away from it from there. The models seem to be bending a little more northwestward later in the forecast period. The majority of them are off the coast of the Dominican Republic, but we want to remember that the corrections with Irma were west and south, west and south, west and south. So let's, with this being under a ridge of high pressure to the north, if that ridge is a little stronger, the track could wind up being more westerly than northwesterly later in the forecast period. So just bear that in mind, that there is, a margin of error here to deal with. Now, we'll take a look at the latest weather models to see what's going on with that. And I'll set up the GFS first. So we have the new GFS, and I'll have to just change the range here. Hang on one second. Let me get these guys out of the way. And move this up to the top. There we go. Okay, so there's your date and time. And let's bring up the Southern Atlantic view. The Western Atlantic, I'm sorry. And let's make sure that we have the latest model run here, which we will shortly. Okay, so here we are. Here's the first time frame, which is this evening at 8 p.m. For the GFS, with Maria approaching the southern leewards. You can see Jose up to the northwest off the Carolina coast, and the GFS tracks it over the leewards. Looks like it at about a Cat 2 status here by later tomorrow afternoon, tomorrow evening. continues on its northwest course over the Virgin Islands. At this point, the pressure is down to, strong Cat 2 status here would be 964 millibars. Then it goes to 952. And it looks like it's coming, if it goes into Puerto Rico, it looks like it's going to be coming in from the southeast. And this is going to put the Virgin Islands in the northeast quad, which is where we usually experience the worst conditions. Just wonderful here for you folks. I mean, of all things to have happen, to have a second pass of another major hurricane. Then it takes it right over Puerto Rico Tuesday night into early Wednesday morning. It emerges it off the west coast of Puerto Rico, still as a Category 3. And then we're on the north, touching the north coast of the Dominican Republic before we start to get a little bit more of a northward component of motion, and then into the southeastern Bahamas by Friday into Saturday. Now, what it does beyond this period is going to depend on Jose, which you see up here off the Delaware coast. Now, that is after Jose moves up to just south of Long Island and orchestrates another loop, okay? All the models seem to be orchestrating a loop of one form or another to bring a weakening Jose back toward the U.S. coastline later this week and this weekend, probably as eventually a non-tropical or remnant low. But what this will do in the long term, if this is correct, is that it will create a trough in the east, and that will open an alleyway, possibly for Maria to move up the eastern seaboard in a fashion maybe not that different from Jose. So let's go back and review the upper air with Maria. And we will start with tomorrow afternoon. And actually, I'm sorry, this was yesterday afternoon. You can see Jose split the ridge here, and just remember that, okay? Remember this look. You've got high pressure in the northeastern Gulf. You've got that extends out to the Bahamas. You've got this high from Bermuda on east, and that high was one big high yesterday, but Jose basically punched a hole, found a weakness, and is playing through that weakness to move up the eastern seaboard, which is what it's doing now. Maria now is under the ridge that's east of the Bermuda, and you can see it here sitting around Bermuda, the 591 height line. So there's a high in there, and the wind is clockwise around the high, so it's moving underneath the bottom of that high, which is, more of an east or east-southeast flow, moving it west-northwest. And you have a general ridge extending from the Gulf of Mexico to the Atlantic. Maria is under that ridge, and notice that you've got a hole that gets punched again because Jose is at this point dropping southwestward, opening up a trough for Maria to respond to. Now, this, of course, is assuming that Jose does orchestrate that loop. A loop from that position, while not impossible, is highly unusual. So we are going to have to review it with a certain degree of skepticism. But the models, the GFS, the European, all do it. The Canadian doesn't quite do it. It does it much further out to the east, which is what the GFS was doing yesterday. But now the GFS has come back. It's not that different from the European. So that is going to be the dilemma with respect to the long term with regards to Maria itself. So, it's pretty straightforward here with respect to how this storm is going to behave. I'm going to put up the 10-meter wind on this so we can look at least the wind profile from the GFS's perspective. And then I'll switch over to the European model and we can take a look at that. So, Maria is a compact storm, much like Irma was. And compact storms usually like to intensify fairly rapidly. So you could very well wind up with a storm much stronger than what the GFS is showing. But you can see that the wind field here is pretty tight. It's not very wide, but apparently it's wide enough to go right over most if not all of the islands in one form or another. The core of the hurricane moves over the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico, just touches the north coast of the Dominican Republic. Gradually, as it's moving northward, you're going to see the area of gales expand on this as the hurricane grows in geographic size as it moves northward. And you see it here that the gales actually almost double in size from where they were at the very beginning. Past the 6th day, the 5th and 6th day, we know that models can get very squirrely. We know that the track corrections have been west and south, but the trough that will be in the east that is going to be driven by Jose, at least we know that that is the one thing that's going to do it. There doesn't seem to be any other renegade systems running around, so we're going to be looking chiefly at that one particular factor and not necessarily looking at some other trough. And if that Jose loop doesn't happen and there's no trough in the east, there'll be a ridge in the eastern part of the United States, which means we will probably see Maria move more westerly. That would be the one way where the threat for perhaps Florida or getting into the Gulf of Mexico, if Jose does not loop, that would and move back toward the U.S. East Coast late this week from the east, that could open up for a more westerly track. So, but since all the models are doing that, you kind of think that there's some sort of reliability in what they're showing, but that doesn't mean that they can't back away from that. There's the Europeans track, which is a little bit further south than the GFS was, and it looks like the GFS is playing catch up here over Puerto Rico. Looks like it does take a good chunk of the hurricane over the north shore of the Dominican Republic into the southeastern Bahamas, responds to that trough, and then because Jose actually moves inland into West Virginia, it lifts Maria. I'm starting to get confused with all these names. Lifts Maria almost straight up the coast the same way it's moved Jose. So, at the very least, in terms of the long range, we know that this is going to change, but it's really fascinating to see this happen. This has really been an exceptional meteorological marvel that we're watching here with these, bizarre things happening in the upper atmosphere and causing these hurricanes to behave in a different way than we're used to. Here's the upper air. The Europeans' upper air view, and we'll start back at the beginning of today, where you see Jose's punch through the ridge. You see Maria underneath the upper high that Jose just broke through. That high strengthens. Maria responds to it by moving west-northwest, and then here comes the trough produced by Jose, just like on the GFS, splits it. But then the remnant upper low of Jose, like the remnant low of Irma, is impacting Jose. The remnant low from Jose is picking up Maria and lifting it northward, almost like a lever. If one part's going down, the other part is moving up. So you can see the puzzle that we have here with respect to the long term. It ain't going to be easy, folks. This is going to keep us very, very busy for all of this coming week. And I'm going to need a break at some point. I don't know when I'm going to get it, but I'm going to need one. But, fascinating weather pattern that we are experiencing here. And this is, certainly one for the record books in a lot of ways. So let me comb through the chat here and say hi to everybody. If I missed you before on the earlier chat, it's good to have you here on the second chat. James Trumbull, Robert Kelsey, Mirtha Gunther, Justin Stewart, John Schultz, 358 Bobcat, New York, Wayne S. Are we taking orders for snow this winter? You'll take a few for Long Island. Wayne, we've had 5 winters in a row of above normal snowfall. We are due for a subpar year. I'm just putting it out there. I don't know that that's the case, but we are due for a subpar year. Cynthia Gwynn Yardis, hello there. James Trumbull, hi. And Jennifer Zarilla, thank you for hitting the super chat and a cup of coffee for me. I actually just had finished a cup in my Obvi cup that was given to me by one of my coworkers. Fios One News. That's my Obvi cup. So I will pick up some coffee, Jennifer, on you and put it and make it and drink it out of my Obvi cup. Thanks again. Hello to, let's see, I just want to make sure I got everybody. James NASCAR fan, Daniel Dust is here. I heard hurricane hunters, Daniel Dust asks, I heard hurricane hunters found a center further south. Wouldn't that shift the models potentially further west? Football night, go Fins. Okay, which storm are we referring to? Because we had two hurricanes, Hunter planes, one, we had one into Maria, one in Jose. So I'm thinking Maria is the one you're thinking of. Yeah, if the center's further south, it is going to impact either way. If the center's a little further south, it is going to impact what models do going forward. Jose, if Jose is a little bit further south than where the models had it, it would be indicating that perhaps Jose is moving slower, and that could possibly mean a more westward track in the longer term, because a slower movement allows it to interact with the trough in the east in a different way. For Maria, the westward track further south means it lessens the threat for the northernmost Leeward Islands, but it increases it more for the southern Leewards. So in that case, it has an unintended negative consequence. John Schultz, you caught 4 fluke today. I caught 2 bass. You were just west of Moriches Inlet, because we were out yesterday evening, and I understand it's thousands and thousands of sea robins, but if you got caught, we've also heard that they're heading out to the inlet now because they're getting ready to go back out into the open ocean. So they're hanging out over there. But congratulations. I hope they were all keepers for you. Let's see. Delvin, you go do your homework now, okay? You'll have plenty of live streams to look at it, and you can look at it later when your homework is done. James Trumbull, hello, Marble Races. Justin Stewart, I think I said hi to you, if not hi again. Zachary Grybos, Wendy Blank, Randy, the Weather Guy, Lynn Volpe, Danville Boost, and, they were keepers. Good, John Schultz, good to hear. The Weather Guy wants to know, should North Carolina keep an eye on Maria, or is it too far out to worry about it now? You know what? Let's see. It's too early to really start worrying about it, certainly. But, keep a side eye. Let's watch the progress of Jose, because the key to Maria's track is going to be what Jose does. If we get that loop back to the southwest, that's going to open up a door. So the question is going to be, is it going to be a southerly flow? Is Jose going to do what the European did, which is to take it well inland and basically, kind of leverage it up the East Coast? Or is it going to act as a kicker and kick it out to the Northeast like the GFS has? The models are not that different. It's just the outcome. It's the two outcomes that might be a little bit different. But that seems to be how this whole thing is going to play out in the long term, based on what we see, what we have been seeing happening here. Ryan Ford, if we start to see Jose making signs of the loop, will that narrow down some of the variables with Maria? Yeah, because if it does, if it makes that loop, we're going to know that trough's going to get opened up. So once that we resolve that, we can at least eliminate Florida as a possibility, and maybe even the Western Bahamas, depending on how far west Maria can get before it comes under the influence of that weakness. So that's going to be key. I believe. And yeah, Patricia Owens, the islands, that's very sad. It really is. It's tragic that this is happening to them the way it has. No one should have to deal with, 3 major hurricanes in the span of 2 weeks. Nobody should have to really deal with one major hurricane in one season or at all, if you can. Danville Boost, you believe that Hurricane Maria still has a chance to hit Florida? If Jose does not do that loop and there's no trough, then Florida would be on the table. But if it does do the loop, and most of the models show it, including the hurricane tracking models, then Maria is going to turn before it gets there. So just know that that's the variable here. Just watch Jose hit New York City. These models aren't even true sometimes, says Awesome Gamer. Well, there are moments where weird things happen. So I don't think it's going to tuck in that far west. I sure hope it doesn't, because that really changes everything in terms of what to expect for an outcome. And by the way, I want to see if the Weather Service corrected something that they did this evening, which was kind of, I don't know, I don't think it was intentional, so I'm not going to, poke too much fun. But let's see that they fixed it. And they finally partially fixed it. Okay. Or did they fix it? No, they did not fix it. This is really so silly. Okay, so they have, we have tropical storm warnings up for the New Jersey coast. Okay, and we have tropical storm warnings up for Long Island, for Nassau and Suffolk County. But Long Island geographically is 4 counties. It's Brooklyn, Queens, Nassau, and Suffolk. Brooklyn and Queens are part of New York City. Okay. All 4 counties have a South Shore with ocean exposure. All right. On the North Shore, you have Queens has exposure to Long Island Sound, as does the Bronx on the other side. Southern Westchester has exposure to Long Island Sound, and so does coastal Connecticut. So they have a tropical storm watch up coastal New Jersey to Monmouth County to Sandy Hook. They have a tropical storm watch up for Nassau County along the South Shore, and Nassau County along the North Shore out to Suffolk to the east end of Long Island. They have a tropical storm watch for the Long Island Sound coast of Westchester County and for coastal Connecticut. But for the exposed South Shore lines of Queens, Brooklyn, Staten Island, okay, and Queens and the Bronx on the North Shore, which lie exactly in between those 2 tropical storm watches, there's no tropical storm watch. So I sent a message over to the Weather Service saying, guys, there's ocean exposure here. You need to fix this because it really looks ridiculous. So hopefully they will fix it, because it doesn't make any sense. But you know what? I didn't make that decision. I think there's probably some confusion with what the Hurricane Center, how they put up their watches, because they use these marine points, but they kind of left out the point in between Sandy Hook and the Rockaways. So I don't know. It's just so bizarre. By the way, for those of you who are interested in Tropical Storm Lee is now back to being a tropical depression. And on the satellite loop, you can see that this is a pretty sheared out cyclone. When you look at the visible before it goes infrared in the sunsets, the center of circulation is completely exposed from a very small area of thunderstorms on the east side. So it has, as forecast, beginning to see some impact from a deep upper trough in the Atlantic, in the east central Atlantic, that's dropping southward, creating strong wind shear conditions. So I suspect that Lee will be gone in the next couple of days, probably degenerating into a remnant low. So for you latecomers, let me just once again show you the Hurricane Maria track guidance here. As the models move Maria over virtually all of the islands in the Leeward Island chain, except maybe the ones that are the furthest northwest. But there's impact here for all of the islands. A direct pass by many of the models over the U.S. and British Virgin Islands, a direct pass over Puerto Rico, and then skimming the north shore of the Dominican Republic before going into the southeastern Bahamas late this week. And to review, because I know this might be the only form of communication for those of you that are lucky enough to get communications out. If you're watching my YouTube channel here, this might be the only hurricane information you're able to get. So I'm going to repeat this for you, and I want to make sure you have all the information at your hands. This is the National Hurricane Center hurricane forecast track. The areas in yellow and blue, which I'll go over, and red, indicating watches and warnings, and also the pink indicating other hurricane watches. But you can see the track taking it over most of the Leeward Islands, over the Virgin Islands, over Puerto Rico, right over the island, and then just skimming the North Shore. And the M is for major hurricane as it is expected to strengthen into a major hurricane over the next day or two. And I'll put up the satellite loop of Maria. I seem to have lost her. Okay, let me see if I can find her. I'm sorry, that satellite loop has basically disappeared on me. So I don't know where it went. Let me see. Just take one more shot here. Maybe if I widen this out, I might be able to see where the cursors are. Sometimes, you know, if I move them too fast and they go off the screen, I can't really get them back on. Or if I make them too small, they might be hiding behind, you know, one of these other maps, which apparently it's not. Okay, so you know what? I'm just going to, real fast, stand by, folks. I can put it back in on another shot. And let's see if I can update this real quick. We'll use the Lee one because that really doesn't matter to anyone at this point, except if you're a stat counter. And there is Maria on the satellite. So we'll make it big enough that you can see. And we'll get rid of the other guys. I'm getting good with all this technical stuff. Okay, so there we are. Here's Maria. Very well defined, the solid core of thunderstorms here near the circulation center. The center's tucked right in, starting to get that symmetrical look. We don't see any evidence of any shear, minimal amount of dry air, water temperatures well up into the 80s in this area, so there's nothing really to stop it from strengthening. So just in review for you, let me pull up the hurricane watches and warnings, and I'll read them out to you. nhc.noaa.gov is the website for the latest Hurricane Center information, so that if you do happen to have some communication ability, you'll be able to access this. So I will give you the rundown of all the watches and warnings. For hurricane warnings, Guadalupe, Dominica, St. Kitts, Nevis, and Montserrat. That's a hurricane warning for those islands. Tropical storm warnings for Martinique, Antigua, Barbuda, Saba, St. Eustatius, and St. Lucia. Hurricane watches are now up for the U.S. and the U.S. Virgin Islands, the British Virgin Islands, Saba and St. Eustatius, St. Martin, the Dutch side, St. Martin, the French side, and St. Bartholomew, Anguilla, and a tropical storm watch is in effect for Barbados, St. Vincent, and the Grenadines. Okay, so again, nhc.noaa.gov for the latest. And let me just see if we've got any last-minute questions and comments. Let's see. Models are going to they've been changing, and they may change some more. Don't be surprised if they do. Jennifer Zarilla, North Carolina should always, especially on the Outer Banks. I actually was there for Tropical Storm Gustav back a number of years ago when I was vacationing on the Outer Banks, and the next to last day of my vacation, after 13 sunny days in a row, we got Gustav that came through at night with 70-mile-an-hour winds. It was quite the experience. Jeff R., thank you so much for hitting the super chat. It gets me a cup of coffee or a cigar, and that's a good thing. I really appreciate it, and thank you for being here and watching me on a regular basis. We're doing this all the time. It seems to be working, so I'm loving it, and I'm glad you folks are loving it too, because you keep coming back, and that's really, really great. Did Maria form Elecram? Welcome. I think you're the first time I've seen you here on the chat board. Did Maria form off the South America coast? No. Maria was a tropical wave that came off the African coast. There were two strong tropical waves that came off the African coast. We had the one that turned into Maria, and also the one that turned into Lee. Lee developed before Maria, but it was the lead wave took a little longer. It got into a position where conditions were favorable once it got west of 45 degrees west, and then it just took off in a big hurry. And we saw it go from a tropical wave to a strong tropical storm. It happened very, very quickly. Delvin, as we said, I showed you a little while ago. Lee, yeah, getting ripped apart by very strong shear. hostile conditions are developing in the eastern Atlantic right now, so I would not expect much to come out of there over the next week or so because of the fact that we're getting this strong trough down in the eastern part of the Atlantic that extends down into the tropical Atlantic. So Maria looks like it was the last one to come out and escape that. So we might get a bit of a break here. The activity has been just so much in overdrive. It's got to take a breather at some point. So we may get a break here after, once Lee disappears, unless that upper low winds up pulling out. Cynthia Gwen Yadis, thanks for the warnings. Friend in St. Bart says, bless you. Cynthia, I would just be curious if you speak to your friend, just so I know, how are things in St. Bart? Do they have communication? Do they, they did evacuate the entire island of Barbuda. There isn't a single person there. I would be curious, and I appreciate he's sharing the videos. That's great. I'm glad that at least, someone's getting, they get the necessary information, that they're getting it from somewhere, which is very important. Awesome Gamer, do I think Jose can do what Sandy did? No, even though it's going to loop back and try to go to the coast, it's going to weaken. Sandy had a very, very deep trough and large upper air storm to react to that turned it into a large non-tropical storm. The flow was much more dynamic with Sandy than it is with this. Now, that being said, with a system coming in from the east like that and getting two passes, plus the new moon, plus the autumnal equinox, there could be some moderate to severe, to maybe pockets of severe coastal flooding later this week. We're going to have to evaluate that when we get into Tuesday to see what happens with respect to the coastline. So there is a possibility that some places might get some significant coastal flooding. We're going to have to pay attention to that. Steve G. just started watching at the beginning of Irma, but now watch all the videos. Thank you very much. I appreciate you being here. Thank you for the kind words. Yeah, I hope things slow down too, because this is like 4 weeks straight nonstop, and I thought I'd get a breather with Irma, and then Jose is doing what it's doing, and then I thought I'd get a breather with Jose, and now we've got Maria. So it's a lot. And yeah, Patricia Owens, we sure hope it's not like Sandy, because we don't want a repeat of that. Delvin, how should interest in Boston continue about Jose? Boston is low-lying right now, Massachusetts Bay Coast. And I would just say, you're in with the tropical storm watch. We'll have to see how far north it gets and how close it gets to Cape Cod. You'll probably have some nor'easter conditions up there. I think they will be manageable, but we'll see. Okay, let's see what we're looking at tomorrow and Tuesday morning. Daniel Duss. Instead, Jose dies out after pulling Maria up, and then Maria squeezes between two highs. Something odd about this whole setup. Oh, the whole setup's bizarre. No question, the whole setup's completely bizarre. So I would certainly leave the door open for anything to happen, if only because of the fact that loops like that in the Atlantic are very unusual. And Kevin Taylor, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. That's very generous of you. Thank you. That buys me 2 cigars. So I really am happy. Thank you very much. I'm glad you like the videos. And if you have any suggestions or ideas, I'm certainly open and welcome to all of you in the audience. If there's something specific that you'd like to see, please ask me, and I will be more than happy to try and get it there for you. And if I forget, just remind me, because after all, I am almost 60, so I do tend to forget these things sometimes. But it's really great. You guys are great. Thank you, Kevin Taylor, for hitting the super chat. Will Maria hit Long Island if Jose does a loop? That it will depend on the extent of the trough that it creates, John Schultz. If it creates a weak trough, maybe Maria winds up moving close northward and closer to the coast. If it creates, I really would have to. Let me take that back. It really will depend ultimately on where Jose winds up. If it sets up right along the coast, it might take Maria out. If it does something like what the European did, where the remnant low of Jose moves inland and west and goes, say, up into West Virginia, that'll create a trough to the west and a southerly flow along the east coast. Something like that could bring it up. Again, this is all speculative at this point. We're just kind of, moving chess pieces around and dealing with theoreticals here. Anything beyond the 5-day period is Joe Cioffi's meteorological squirrel land, as I like to call it. Now, just as a reminder, too, Mirtha, because you do mention schools closed for 2 days here in Western North Carolina when the remnants of Irma went through. I just want to point out for the general audience as two things. When making decisions regarding hurricanes and tropical storms and what actions you need to take, don't ask me. Ask your local officials. Go to the National Hurricane Center's website. There are a number of tools there you can use, or your local National Weather Service office for their recommendations. Also, just to save time, I don't close schools. I don't close down airports. So to ask me whether, flights are going to be canceled and that kind of thing, I can't answer that question. My best advice is, if that is the question you have, call your school district and find out what the criteria is for school closings. Call your airport where you're flying out of, and find out what their criteria is for closing down airports when it comes to weather. And of course, it could be weather dependent on some other place. If you're flying, flying out of an area where there's a tropical storm, it could impact flights in Chicago, in Dallas, and so on. But I'm the wrong person to ask that stuff because I really don't know the answer. The general thing I'm going to tell you is call your airline or call your local airport. So let's see. Awesome Gamer, is there any reason why hurricanes get bigger near New Jersey? Well, everything gets bigger near New Jersey. Awesome. And including the Giants, who are playing tomorrow night. And by the way, if by any chance you're at the Giant game tomorrow, I'm going to be on the Jumbotron doing weather before the game and at the 2-minute warning. So you might catch me on the screen if you happen to be at the Giant game tomorrow at Giant Stadium in East Rutherford. But actually, what happens is, and it's going to happen to Jose, as it gradually, these systems, as they come northward, become more and more non-tropical, which means that their wind field grows, their rained area expands in terms of the geography they cover. But at the same time, instead of having a core of very strong winds, you have a larger area of gales, but the strongest winds are lower. This thing just basically gets its energy spread out. So it does geographically look bigger, even though it isn't necessarily stronger. Okay, so let's it. And by the way, if anyone has to be a Jets fan, who wants to drink bleach with me? Oh, that is hilarious, Michael D335 Petrovich. Oh my God, that is so funny. I don't know a single Jet fan friend of mine. They all have said the same thing. They want the Jets to go 0-16 so that they can get that first-round draft pick. And I guarantee you, if they do, instead of picking a quarterback to lead them, somebody is going to they're going to pick a tight end or a punt kicker, something, or a punter, something like that. Well, that is very, very funny. Thank you for giving me a big laugh here. I really appreciate it. Okay, so let's leave it at that, folks. Again, big thank yous for those who hit Super Chat tonight. Thank you so much for your generosity. A big thank you for everybody being here and asking some great questions. Ryan Ford, you get the last question tonight. If Maria is stronger than Jose, will it take the storm longer to become non-tropical? That depends on a lot of different things, not just whether it's stronger. Maria is definitely going to be stronger than Jose. I think Maria is probably going to hold on to tropical characteristics longer because it may come into the Bahamas, the eastern Bahamas, as at least a Category 3, where Jose had that weakening and wound up weakening down to a tropical storm. So it might change things a little bit. But as it comes northward, they always wind up changing their structure to some degree. All right, folks, I hope you had a great evening and enjoyed these two chats we had tonight. Thank you so much again for being here. And we'll see you tomorrow. We'll do one in the morning, and then I'm going to have to see how my night goes tomorrow night as far as doing one tomorrow evening. But I will try and get 2 live streams on one way or the other. I will schedule them on my page so that you'll know when the next live stream is up. And, of course, if you subscribe to my YouTube channel, you're getting notifications of the live streams, in which case you know exactly when I'm going live. Thank you, everybody, for being here. If you're watching from the Leeward Islands or the Virgin Islands or Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, please do what you have to do to secure yourself and your families with this next Hurricane Maria that's moving through. And we will see you on Monday.